4 Airbnb guests followed my housekeeper home and put my housekeeper in the hospital. Gang activity runs the underbellies of bigger cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York. You see it on the news. The police forces are overworked and underpaid. Their lives are constantly at stake with high-level crime, and they become desensitized and cavalier about the small stuff. They just don't have time for little people like us. And because of that, from coast to coast, you can see changes in policy and police behavior, where places like San Francisco are making it not an arrestable offense to steal from somebody as long as it's less than $1,000. And even though Philadelphia doesn't have something like this exactly, the police behave as if they do. I accidentally crossed paths with that underbelly as an Airbnb host in Philadelphia, where 2 people died. My housekeeper almost died as well. And the police spent 4 months trying, but failing to do anything to keep the Airbnb guests of the greater Philadelphia area safe, as 40 or more gang members started targeting Airbnbs throughout the city over the coming months. In the 8 months that followed, just one Airbnb reservation became my biggest nightmare. I started hosting in Philadelphia in the spring of 2018. With a few years of experience under my belt already, it was going to be a breeze, or so I thought. Philadelphia is a beautiful city, great food, great art, albeit mostly graffiti, and the bridges are out of this world. The city is built in just such a way that just 2 miles from where Benjamin Franklin used to live, the most dangerous, violent, and drug-ridden neighborhood in the entire United States exists: Kensington. And just next door to Kensington has been Philadelphia's biggest gentrification project, Fishtown. And not long after landing in Philadelphia, I booked my very first Airbnb on the north side of Fishtown, right next to Kensington. It was the dead of February, biting cold, probably a little too cold for crime at the time, so I still had no clue what I was about to get myself into. And just south of my Airbnb property was a few really nice coffee shops: Reanimator, Elixir, The Kettle Black, One Shot Coffee. We could give La Colombe the obligatory gangster nod at this point, I guess. It was basically a wonderland of caffeine, and I was its prisoner. Naturally, when I started looking for Airbnb properties, I wanted to be close to where I wanted to be. And over the next couple of years, as I grew my business in Philadelphia, I found myself in other places too, like Center City or Fairmount or Chinatown. But I was most proud to land an apartment directly across the street from the Kettle Black. That is where I made my unicorn-themed property. The unicorn paintings were illustrated by John, the manager I hired in Philadelphia at the time. John unfortunately experienced a near-fatal heart condition. After surviving 9 surgeries, he moved back to Michigan to be closer to his family so he could recover. I really do hope he finds a way to get back into art again in the future, if his body allows it. And at this time, we were discovering that if you dropped your prices too low in Philadelphia, you would get bad guests. So we decided to take a lower risk path, not drop our prices down so low, and just choose to not get bookings in our slower seasons. This was all well and good, business as usual even, until it happened.
China has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus,
coronavirus.
Disaster. Everything was canceled everywhere. Brian Chesky pulled the rug and left hosts literally out to hang and die on the vine. It was more than just news. It was absolute pandemonium.
Where do things stand right now? And maybe even more important, how do you even begin to manage things going forward?
Airbnb asked me to take down some of my more damning footage about their misdoings, which I obviously declined because I am an advocate for hosts first and then for the opportunity second. And perhaps maybe this is why I'm not surprised to Airbnb's response to the near-death experience of my housekeeper. They did what Airbnb always does. It was the fall after the pandemic was announced. Philadelphia was shut down. Bars, clubs, and pubs alike. People were booking Airbnbs to party in Philadelphia. And this was really the beginning of all hell breaking loose, with parties, criminals, and high-risk guests finding their way to Airbnb post-COVID. So naturally, what did we do? We hired on-site overnight security. We even found a way to get Airbnb to pay for that security whenever somebody did something wrong, but it was still unsustainable. There were guns getting pulled on my overnight security team. The neighbors were in uprising against their properties, and I, with one of my properties, ended up in the news in a bad way. One house was so out of control with everybody booking it to throw a party that we had to shut the listing down, but not before the community made it a main talking point in their anti-Airbnb movement. Because of that house, we shut down all larger properties. We stuck to just studios, 1s, and 2s, which really was just a band-aid over a bullet wound. Later in that winter, not even spring yet, we had a run of bookings that seemed harmless on the surface. But what was going on is they were documenting physical addresses, check-in guides, host information, the scoop on anything valuable inside these homes. And they developed what must have been a spreadsheet of listings all over Philadelphia. I and my team, we were one of many hosts that were targeted. They even targeted multiple properties of ours. And by the time that they struck, it was impossible to keep up with. The police in Philadelphia are already nearly unresponsive, and their tone towards these break-ins of Airbnb hosts losing possessions was as apathetic as you could imagine, if not worse. They did nothing. They responded to nothing. They advised nothing. For what must have been dozens upon dozens of break-ins across the city until that gang went too far. The same gang that was responsible for these relentless break-ins across the city was caught on camera beating an elderly man to death. And that was the day I finally received a phone call back from police. They wanted to know everything that they could possibly know about our dealings with this gang, and more than that, they wanted our cooperation to help bring them in. And we were still victim frequently to their break-ins. They would come in at 7 a.m., noon, 8 p.m., 1 o'clock in the morning, anytime, at any property, any day of the week. They were everywhere. And police, until now, would never make arrests. It was our property that the gang members were found and caught for murder. So it was also our property that became public enemy number one, according to this gang. One day, during our housekeeper's 11 a.m. scheduled turnover, while they're cleaning, 6 boys and a girl break into our property and push their way through the front door and immediately start going to war with everything in the property. The walls, the furniture, the dishes. They destroyed absolutely everything. My cleaner bolts out the front door, runs to safety and calls me, and then under my instruction, also calls the police. But the cops are less enthusiastic than normal because they already caught the guys that committed the murder. They weren't after the rest of the gang. It took them a while to show up, and by the time they lazily pulled in front of the building, the gang was able to slip out the back. And there really wasn't anything that the housekeeper could do at this point but to file a police report and then to clean up the mess. The home was obviously no longer livable, so we canceled the next guest for what must have been the 50th time in 4 months, causing us hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss. And up until this day, the loss was the biggest of our concerns. And the money was the biggest of our worries up until that day. It took my housekeeper 7 hours to clean up all of that mess and destruction. It was already dark by the time he left. His longtime girlfriend just got back into town with his 2 sons. They needed a bigger place to stay, so they were staying in one of my Airbnb apartments in Center City for free. He was on his way home to see his kids. They found his body face down outside of his car around the 400 block of South 16th Street in Philadelphia just after 9 p.m. with what could have been a life-threatening head injury if somebody didn't find him while he was passed out on the ground. And I have never wanted to commit a crime against someone so badly in my life. I had 2 options. And option 1 was to go hide in my apartment with a baseball bat and cause bodily harm to a half-dozen teenagers. Or option 2 was to take the losses and leave Philadelphia for good. For the sake of being here to teach you guys how to Airbnb, both good and bad, I opted for choice number 2. Thank you guys for hanging in there on a heavy one. I appreciate it. On a lighter note, I did make a video of my unicorn property. If you want to watch that video, I also teach how to take the best photos of your Airbnb property ever with my good friend and professional photographer, Hui. Watch that video next. As always, thank you so much for spending time watching my content. It means the world. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.